Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sharik Abdul Ghani. I am the director of Minarat Foundation, where our focus is lifting the voices of American Muslims through multi-faith and civic engagement. We're here today with Miss Mary Nan Huffman, who is running for Harris County District Attorney, and she is actually opening up our candidate Q&A series, where we have individual conversations with candidates running at a local, state, and national level on their platform issues and issues that concern the wider Muslim and the wider multi-faith community as well. These are just conversations, and if you have questions that you'd like posed to our candidates, especially today, Ms. Huffman, please post them in Facebook or in our YouTube comments, hashtag us on Twitter, and if we have time, we'll definitely get to them. But Ms. Huffman, if we could start off with, you and I were just having a conversation about TV shows and takeout. You said you recently had some takeout. What was it?
I had Thai food.
Thai food. And what's your favorite Thai food?
I love the papaya salad and the lob salad.
From where? Are we talking Thai Gourmet, Thai Kitchen? What are we talking about?
Well, I just found this new place called New Thai. It's opened up close to downtown, close to my office, and it was amazing.
Well, I was about to get you, because if you're going to say a restaurant outside of Harris County, I'm going to say, are you sure you're running for Harris County DA? Or which county you're running for? Excellent. So, Ms. Huffman, could you give us a brief introduction about yourself?
Sure. I'm Mary Nan Huffman, and I'm running for Harris County District Attorney because public safety should be the one thing the government provides for its people. And over the last 4 years, we have seen an increase in crime in Harris County. Our murders have doubled from last year. Our domestic violence cases are up by 36%. Our violent crimes are up by 17%. And I'm sick and tired of the crime here. Not only is Harris County not safer than it was 4 years ago, it's less safe. I'm a mom. I have 2 young boys, and I want them to grow up in a safe place. And whether you're a Republican, Democrat, Catholic, Muslim, Baptist, or if you're Jewish, we all want to be safe.
Well, you know what? That's a terrific introduction. And it sounds like you've been practicing that for some time now. That really takes us right into your key platform issues. I think you had mentioned public safety. In fact, on your website, there's a great deal of information about public safety overall. Could you take us through your top 3 platform issues?
So basically, it's holding criminals accountable. In Harris County, we have a problem with violent repeat offenders. It is seeking justice in evidence-based investigations, supporting the efforts of good law enforcement, and being a voice for crime victims.
Well, tell us more about being a voice for crime victims. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that position and tell us why that is something so meaningful to you?
Victims of crime are the only people that don't choose to be part of the system. As a prosecutor, I chose that for my career. Police officers, they choose to be law enforcement. The judge chooses to run for office, and even the bad guy picks when to commit the crime. But the victim has no choice in the matter. And think about how overwhelmed you would be if you have never been involved in the legal system before and you are a victim of a crime, how to navigate all of that and see that justice is done in the end.
Well, tell us about this. Tell us about this aspect of justice in the end, and how it relates to your platform on public safety. Seeing justice, how do you balance seeing justice, but also ensuring that the rights of victims are respected, but also the rights of criminals are respected?
Absolutely. I think that our system works best when we have good adversaries on both sides. Good lawyers for the prosecution, good lawyers for the defense. People, obviously, because we're dealing with someone's freedom and liberty, their rights need to be protected, right? And if you didn't commit a crime, but were charged with one, wouldn't you want justice to happen swiftly and be done with it? I mean, can you imagine the rain cloud hanging over your head if you'd been charged with a felony you didn't commit and you were on bond for 4 years? That isn't justice either. However, when you have people that have become victims of crime, it's equally as important for them that the government is there being a voice for crime victims. Our courthouse belongs to everyone. And it doesn't matter if you're a citizen or not a citizen. whether you are a high-ranking member in the community or just an average person, the courthouse is there for everyone. And so crime victims need to be able to use those resources.
Now, you mentioned something very interesting earlier. You had said swift justice, and you also talked about making sure people get through the court system quickly. How do you do that in a time of COVID, in a time where many judges still haven't been appointed? How do you do that during this era, and especially with such a backlog?
When Kim Og took office 4 years ago, she fired 658 years of experience. And these were prosecutors that were chief prosecutors and experienced senior prosecutors. And since then, she's never been able to have a full staff. So I think number one, getting the staff at the DA's office back to 100% operating capacity, to have people there to make these decisions and sort out and prioritize what are the most important cases. Even a court, there's 52 weeks in a year, and they're going to hear 50 jury trials. So that'd be a trial every week except for, Christmas and New Year's. What cases are you going to try? Are you going to try a trace residue cocaine on a pipe case? Or are you going to try the murders and the sexual assaults of children and things like that? So I think that it takes experienced prosecutors to prioritize and figure out what is most important.
How would you bring back that experience? What would you do to ensure that this backlog is taken care of? And a second part to that question is, why do you have that experience to be able to bring the experience back? What is your management experience? What is your enterprise management experience? Why do you feel you're qualified to do this?
I think being a prosecutor is kind of like being a police officer. Nobody does it for the money. You do it because it's a calling and it's something that you feel passionate about. Some of these prosecutors that left, I'm sure not all of them will come back. The problem is, no one leaves the DA's office and says, gosh, my life is so much worse now that I'm not a prosecutor, because they're all in private practice making a lot of money. But it is a calling. And I have had people say, I want to come back to that office. The district attorney's office in Harris County, it should be one of the best offices to work at, not just in Texas, but all over the United States. Mm-hmm. And, when Kim Og came in, she fired people that didn't agree with her politics. And really, the DA's office should have nothing to do with politics. Just like we said, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, everybody wants to live in a safe place. And it should be about doing the right thing each and every time. When I was a prosecutor for 10 years in Montgomery County, I worked with multi-agency task forces in Texas and nationwide, managing the different interests of all these different agencies coming through. I worked with a group of prosecutors, police officers, federal agents to make sure that everything was running smoothly. I never wanted to run for public office, but I think when you become a mom, things change, and I do want my boys to grow up in a safe place.
Right.
One of the last cases I worked on in Montgomery County, there was a mom who was going to put her 2-year-old daughter on a Greyhound bus from Houston to Conroe and sell her for $1,200 for 2 hours of sex with this man. And thankfully, the man that she met was an undercover officer that I was working with in one of these multi-agency task force. And so we set up surveillance at the downtown Greyhound station in Houston and surveillance up in Conroe. And before she put that little girl on the bus, she sent a text message to the officer and said, hey, you think we should stay in Harris County? Because that DA up there, he doesn't like people like us. And for me, that was kind of an eye-opening moment, because it wasn't the crime that bothered her. It was the jurisdiction. She thought that if she committed this crime in Harris County and got caught, she wouldn't be in any trouble. We're not giving criminals enough credit. They know where to commit crimes. And right now, Harris County is a safe haven for bad guys.
That was an incredible story, and what a heart-wrenching story that happened within our own family.
Yeah.
It's our families and our loved ones that we rely on to protect us the most. And unfortunately, oftentimes we also hear that it's our loved ones that can also put us in the most danger.
Absolutely.
So let's shift gears a little bit, since we're talking about families, and let's talk about an issue that is near and dear to our organization, to many of our multi-faith partners as well, the school-to-prison pipeline. And we know there's well-documented evidence, especially here in our state, of there being not an official school to prison pipeline, but we see when a child is suspended for the first time and then the second time or sent to in-school suspension, there's a direct correlation between being suspended in school or not having access to the right educational resources and leading up to jail time. And there's actually data that shows that you can predict that through statistical modeling. What would you do to disrupt the school to prison pipeline if elected?
One of the things I'm really passionate about is going into schools. When I was the chief of child exploitation and child human trafficking, we would go in and talk to kids on every level, from kindergarten all the way up to high school. Of course, with age-appropriate presentations on, what is good conduct online and what could be crimes online. A child sending a naked picture of themselves to somebody else, things like that kids don't even realize are crimes, or possessing those pictures, which are technically in Texas child pornography. So I think educating kids in schools about this, but I think it's also about educating parents too. I think we see some parents that want the school system to do everything for them. They want them to be the discipliners. They want them to be the educators. They want them to teach them about morality and right and wrong. And we need to take some responsibility for that. I think telling parents that, hey, your kid has this device and you need to be a parent here and you need to monitor it. Kids don't get to have privacy. They just don't, because we know that they're not mature enough to make good decisions. And that's why parents are there to mentor them. And so, empowering parents to not be the best friend and be the parent so we can raise these kids that do make good decisions.
But Mary, tell me how you would leverage the office of the DA to disrupt that. And from a parenting standpoint, I absolutely agree. We don't let our son with the device, without, we don't give him too much of a leash. He has times we're involved every step of the way in his schooling, his education. We know who his friends are and what's going on, and that's generally that should be good parenting. That's modeling good behavior. But how would you leverage the office of the DA to disrupt the pipeline altogether?
So I think that it starts with community prosecution, sending prosecutors into schools to give these kids the resources that they're looking for and these mentorships that maybe they're not getting in the school system or from their parents at home. We did a lot of that at the DA's office when I was a prosecutor there. So community prosecution, sending them in, going to civic meetings, things like that, we're educating the parents, and then also educating people that work with kids, especially in the human trafficking realm. We had so many bus drivers give us tips about, hey, these kids, I've been watching this kid grow up and all of a sudden she's showing up with new shoes and new clothes and, being groomed and being trafficked. And then we see other kids in the school recruiting other kids to do this as well. So I think it's about, sharing information and giving them the resources that they need and using the DA resources to do that.
Excellent. Which really takes us to our next question. And something that's very important to our community. And for our viewers out there who may have questions, feel free to comment or send an email to info@minaretfoundation.com for some of your questions, and we'll definitely get to them if we can. As Minaret Foundation, where our focus is multi-faith and civic engagement, but it is the multi-faith and civic engagement for the Muslim community. One issue is very near and dear to us in terms of sensitivity, and that is Islamophobia. And we've seen a significant rise of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism and general hate since 2016, for whatever reason. But we've seen a percentage go up, and it just continues to go up and up and up as society really start to entertain rhetoric on an increased level. How would you utilize the office of the district attorney to combat Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and other forms of hate?
As the district attorney, You are, or in Harris County, the #1 law enforcement official in the 3rd largest county in America, and using that platform to educate the public about the real Islam and not what the media is trying to show us. Also educating the employees that work there. We need to talk about the Muslim values like morality, responsibility, family, talk about things, let the public know the things that the Quran, what you believe in, equality, family, justice, brotherhood, compassion, mercy, all of those things. The DA's office, we talk about what's the right punishment for the crime, but sometimes mercy is the right thing to do. I am pro law enforcement and I am pro law and order, but I know that not every criminal is the same and not every crime is the same. And I 100% believe in second chances because we are all human beings and we all make mistakes. And so having diversion programs in the DA's office for these first time offenders that maybe did make a mistake, and this is a wake up call for them. It doesn't mean they need to be labeled as a criminal for the rest of their life. But maybe this is the wake up call they needed to get back on track, with their families and with society. I think things that Muslims believe in, these are universal things that everybody wants. And so instead of talking about Muslim or Christian or Republican or Democrat, let's talk about our values. And together we can have a successful society if we all live and promote those same values.
Well, talking about morality and family, I'm so glad that you brought that up because, as Muslims, sometimes we have to really try to cut through the fat of the rhetoric that's out there about our community. And we don't find that just within our community. We're really seeing that within the Asian community, the Jewish community, the Black community, the Latino community. There's so much rhetoric out there. It really helps when our electeds are able to help our communities cut through the fat, because sometimes our electeds have that platform, such as the district attorney or federal representatives or local and state representatives, county representatives may have that platform to really amplify the voices of minority communities. And we know Houston is the most diverse city in the country, and it's what the rest of the country is going to look like in the very near future. So we have a real opportunity to lead the way. Speaking about Islamophobia and anti-Semitism and other forms of hate, what is your perspective on prosecuting hate crimes, especially if it is an uphill battle to prove intent? Because one thing about hate crime, even though it might be clear cut to minorities where her headscarf was pulled off or a swastika was painted, for a hate crime, unless there's clear and present evidence, such as a swastika, you have to prove intent. And proving intent sometimes can be an incredibly difficult thing to do. You have to go through social media conversations. You have to find proof that they have white supremacist affiliations or Nazi affiliations or affiliations with other hate groups, that they've have a pattern of abuse in the past. Proving hate crimes, and we've been told this many times over, can be an uphill battle. What's your perspective on prosecuting it, and what's your commitment to minority communities?
Getting prosecutors the tools and the training that they need to prosecute these crimes is important because, like you said, proving intent is hard. And knowing what resources there are available, knowing to go to the social media sites, knowing to see what their affiliations are, learning about white supremacists and things like that. Until you know those things and you are able to recognize the signs, that may be something that totally misses you. But I think it's also, taking what you've learned in other types of cases and applying that to hate crimes. When you're trying a child sexual abuse case, like a touching case, in Texas, you have to prove that it was with intent to arouse or gratify, right? How hard is that to prove intent? The child is saying, oh, he touched me. And, the adult is saying, I was rubbing her stomach, or I was applying medicine, or I was, and so proving intent in those kind of cases is extremely hard, but it doesn't mean that we shy away from prosecuting them. Sometimes there is a difference between cases that are hard to prove and cases that didn't happen. And I have seen both. I have had a case where I thought, man, this person didn't commit this crime and I need to cut it loose and dismiss it 100%. But there are other cases where I'm like, man, this is going to be hard to prove, but I believe what this child is telling me, and it's just as worthy to go forward. And so I think that having prosecutors that are committed to the cause, talking to prosecutors and finding out what they're passionate about. I was passionate about child sexual abuse cases, and I know that when you put prosecutors in a position that they are passionate about, they work harder, they work smarter, they find ways, creative ways to come up with solutions to get the best results. And so I think finding these people that are passionate about diversity and hate crimes is something very important to do.
So, we had a conversation with Fort Bend District Attorney Brian Middleton. He's the first person of color to actually be in that position as a DA in Fort Bend County. And when myself and some of our friends in the Jewish community asked him about hate crimes, he had something very, very important. He said, if I see it as a hate crime, even if it's difficult to prove as a hate crime, I will prosecute it as a hate crime.
Absolutely.
Because it's important to send a message to everyone out there that this is not an enhancement that you're going to get away with. Could you speak a little bit to hate crimes enhancements?
So if you commit a crime, but you see that it is a hate crime, then that enhances the punishment range for that crime. And so, adding those enhancement paragraphs on there to have a stiffer punishment is a deterrent for people to not commit those kind of crimes. And if it is a hate crime, there's no reason not to put that enhancement on that, even if it is difficult to prove. These are worthy cases that need strong advocates, and I'm going to charge cases as they're committed.
Mm-hmm. That's good to hear. That's good to hear. And thank you for mentioning that. Would you say that you'd be able to make a commitment that says, where you essentially say, if I see a hate crime, if it looks like a hate crime, I'm going to do my best to prosecute it as a hate crime?
100%.
Well, thank you. Excellent. The next question that we have is really regarding our current climate. We have the killing of Mr. Floyd in Minneapolis sparked protests and riots throughout the country. And it really re-sparked a conversation that we in our nation have had many times over about police reform. And specifically this time, it was about defunding the police. With the current environment regarding police reform, do you feel anything needs to be done regarding the relationship between law enforcement agencies and, in your position, HPD, constables, and the sheriff's department, and the DA's office? And if so, what would you do?
Being a police officer is a difficult job, and it's always been a difficult job, even before people had ever heard George Floyd's name or knew where Ferguson, Missouri was on a map. You think about some of these first police officers that graduated from these early academies and what they had. They had a .38 special revolver, a pair of handcuffs, a flashlight, and they were trained mostly to drive and shoot. Now, thinking about officers today, they carry semi-automatic weapons, double handcuffs, multiple magazines. They have a taser, a tactical knife. They have, in their trunks, they have a rifle, a shotgun, a patrol bag full of report forms, and a first aid kit. Mm-hmm. I mean, the amount of education, re-education, and continuing education that officers go through is more than most of us will ever have to do during our entire careers. So I think continuing that education and forming a partnership with the district attorney's office. The DA and the police, we're not on the same team, but we are allies, and it's important to work together to make this system work most efficiently. It's so easy for a prosecutor to see a case and maybe not like it or not like what the officer did and dismiss the case and move on down the road. That's the easy thing to do. But what prosecutors need to do is when they see something like that, call that officer into their office, watch the video with them together and say, hey, here's what I'm seeing. This is why this case, isn't going to be prosecuted in court. The evidence collection could have been better right here, or you didn't remember to read Miranda warnings, or, and going through, most officers who do this job, they do it because they want to do a good job. Nobody signs up for this because they want to do a bad job. And I think educating officers, creating that partnership and alliance to make this system work. I've had people say to me like, oh, you work for the Houston Police Officers Union and you're the police girl and you support law enforcement and, you're going to help bad cops. 100% pro law enforcement, but I'm pro good law enforcement. Nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop because it takes all of their work, right. Just like in every profession, we know there's good priests and bad priests. There's good teachers and bad teachers. It doesn't mean that they're all bad, but we need to work together. And, if you take advantage of a Harris County resident, I don't care if you are wearing a badge or sitting on commissioner's court, you need to be held accountable.
Well, this Chief Acevedo of Houston Police has said many times over that he works. Part of his job description is to get rid of the bad apples in HPD. We know there's 5,300 commissioned officers within HPD with about 1,200 support personnel, and Chief Acevedo is pretty proud of the fact that he's been able to remove 160 bad apples. And for him, he said very publicly and very openly that just means that he has to keep identifying and rooting out the bad apples. And as you had mentioned, it's the bad apples that are hated the most. There's no one that hates a bad cop more than a good cop, because it really makes their lives and their job much more difficult. But the primary way Chief Acevedo has been able to remove police officers from the rank and file of HPD is through internal processes, internal affairs, going through evidence, working with the unions, and removing them from or firing them from HPD. What do you feel is your responsibility? What would you feel your responsibility would be as the district attorney of Harris County to prosecute these bad cops? So I'll give you an example. If you were the district attorney in Minneapolis, looking at the police officers who killed Mr. Floyd through incredibly unreasonable and unjustifiable force, what would your action be? How would you work as a district attorney in Minneapolis?
That officer needs to go to prison. I mean, if you commit a crime, you need to be held accountable just like everybody else, just like any other regular citizen. Even working with police officers and talking about this case, I mean, I haven't met one police officer that thought anything about that was justified, and so police officers, every shooting where there's a dead body is technically a homicide or a murder unless it's justified, like there's something like self-defense. But if it's not justified, then they need to go through the criminal justice system.
So you're saying these rules have to be applied equally. If you do the crime, you do the time.
Yes.
Right. Now let's switch gears a little bit and let's look at a different part of the country, Louisville in Kentucky, where we have Miss Taylor was killed in her bed through a shot from a window, mistaken identity, mistaken house altogether. And the officers in that situation, well, nothing's been done. Nothing's been done. If you were the DA in Louisville, what would you have done?
I think that, when cases take a very long time, especially cases involving law enforcement officers, it erodes the public's faith in the criminal justice system, and the public feels like maybe these police officers are getting special treatment. Mm-hmm. I think that we can do more with police transparency and accountability. Maybe even have something on the DA's office website showing all the officer-involved shootings that are pending and what their status is, where they are in court. We have a case here in Baytown. Pamela Turner was shot, and I know the residents of Baytown are, they want justice for Pamela Turner. Well, that shooting happened over a year ago, and there's been nothing from the DA's office. Now we have another Baytown police officer who there was a shooting 3 months ago, and he's already been indicted. And so what is the difference in those cases? Why do some cases take longer to investigate than others, but no case should take over a year to decide whether or not there's probable cause that a crime's been committed?
Speaking about transparency, how do you feel this process needs to be more transparent between law enforcement and the DA's office?
I think that it is about checks and balances. Mm-hmm. The police have a job to do. If they find that someone has, there's probable cause that they've committed a crime, they have, they make the arrest.
Right.
But on the other hand, we have DAs and prosecutors who look at the evidence, make sure that constitutional rights are protected, make sure the search and seizure rules are followed. And, if you have prosecutors that are there for justice, that's the goal, to seek justice, then the system works pretty well. But I think being open with the public, having resources that the public can go to look up, to see the status of cases, things like that, I think that helps with transparency.
I love the transparency aspect of it, and being transparent. And I believe that's one of the key message points of protesters within, or of activists within the Black Lives Matter and other movements out there, is that while there is some transparency, we could do a lot better. We could do a lot better as a nation.
Right, and do better communicating. If the reason why it hasn't gone to a grand jury is because of COVID, we haven't been able to impanel a new grand jury because we can't get hundreds of people in a room to pick 12 people that are going to sit on a grand jury for the next 3 months, then tell us that. I mean, the average person doesn't know what the hurdles are at the DA's office and why things are stalling and why there is case, backlog. But if they did a little bit better job just kind of explaining the process, or having resources to explain to the general public, these are the reasons why, then I think it does build trust with communication. And like my mom always said, if you have nothing to hide, you hide nothing.
In my mom's case, it was more by, if you have nothing to hide, just go to your room, because I know you'll confess anyways.
I love it.
So we know Houston is the most diverse city in the United States. I mentioned this earlier. Our electeds are always talking about it. Journalists are talking about it. Academia is always talking about it. And Mr. Kleinberg of Rice University is the proponent and is the one in the Kinder Institute who really brings the data to show that Houston is the most diverse city in the United States. One of the principles that we learn in peace building is that minority communities, unless they can see themselves in their government, they don't have as strong of an attachment to the communities. Diversity remains a talking point unless we can see it reflected in our relationships and in our government. What would you do to ensure diversity in all aspects of your office, starting from the leadership all the way to administrative assistants?
Diversity is extremely important. But take, for example, say your son, if he had a form of cancer, you would want the best doctor to take care of him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Absolutely.
You want the best. This is your kid. I think the same applies to the DA's office. If my child is murdered or my child has been kidnapped or sexually assaulted, I want the best person to bring justice for my child, 100%. Now, the great thing about Houston is we are so diverse, so we can have diversity and have the best. We don't have to compromise. So I think it is important, reaching out to some of these different law schools that may have a more diverse population, recruiting from some places, because who wouldn't want to live in Houston, Harris County, Texas, right? This is a great place to live. So recruiting also is extremely important, but it's important to have the best person for the job.
Well, what are you going to do to change the weather in Houston to make sure we can attract a more diverse population in the city? You said it's the best place to live. I'm looking at the weather, and the weather is terrible.
I don't think it's the weather. I think it's the mosquitoes. We need to do something about those mosquitoes.
So, Mary Nan, you spoke earlier about wanting the best person for the job. And I hear you on that. And that's an argument that makes absolute sense. We always want the best people for the job. But oftentimes we find that there are people of color, there are minority communities who have the best people for the job, but they don't have the opportunities to enter the workforce, specifically maybe in government, in law enforcement, just in civil society overall, or they may not have the means to do so or the connections to do so. What would you do to ensure an equitable or an equal playing field for people of all colors, all backgrounds, to be able to secure a position as an assistant district attorney? I
think that you set clear expectations. I don't necessarily have the answer for getting the people there to apply for the job. But I think once somebody is in the DA's office, whether you're a legal assistant or an investigator or a victim's advocate or a prosecutor, there are clear expectations about promotion and advancement throughout the system. And so it is based on performance, who is the best, and not anything else like race, color, religion, anything like that.
Got it. Understood. So, and we're bringing it back to our last question. And, you've been very generous with your time. Really appreciate it. And our last question is, how does your faith, your worldview, or your moral compass inspire you and your work?
I think that, criminal justice is pretty common sense. It's about right and wrong. And I think being taught that as a child and growing up in church and having great parents, that all of that prepares you to be a public servant. And having that moral compass, I have been in situations where it would be really easy for me to do the wrong thing. Right. But I think that, that's something that's ingrained in you. I had a case I was trying. There was a little girl who'd been sexually abused by a man, and another little girl, totally unrelated, also sexually abused. And in order to get that other little girl's testimony in, there had to be an outcry witness. Well, I had listed who I thought the outcry witness was on the paperwork. And in the middle of trial, I find out that's not the outcry witness. And the mom says, "Do you want me to be the outcry witness anyway?" I'll say she's the first person who told me. And I'm thinking in my mind for a split second, if they don't hear from this other child, maybe this guy won't be found guilty. And I know he did it. I know he did it to this girl. I know he did it to this girl. But that's not how the system works. And I said, no, if you're not the witness, then you're not the witness, and that's okay. We're going to go forward anyway, and we're going to give it our best shot. And you know what? The right thing happened in the end. I think that working at the DA's office, I tried a lot of cases and I prayed before each one, but I never prayed for a conviction. I prayed that justice would be done. And as a prosecutor, that has to be your goal.
Absolutely. Ensuring the safety of the community and making sure justice is served is very important. Judge KP George, who we work very closely with in our organization, he's the county judge of Fort Bend County. He told us, I think he may have said it privately, but I'm going to say it publicly. He told us that he wakes up every morning and he reads the Bible. And before he has to make any hard decision, he goes into a meditative state, he consults the Bible, he reaches out to God, and he asks for assistance. Do you have a higher power, or do you have someone that you speak to, that you consult with before you make these hard and tough decisions? That inevitably, if elected as Harris County District Attorney, you will have a slew of hard decisions. I think, what is it, on the hour? What would you?
I mean, maybe even more frequently than that. But absolutely, I believe in God. I pray for guidance. I pray that I'm doing the right thing and that I am making the right decisions. And I look to the Bible for guidance in all of that. And I need all of y'all's prayers too, everybody that watches this show, because it is a tough job. And with great power comes great responsibility. And we need...
I know someone who said that. Was that Spider-Man?
Yeah, I have boys, can't you tell? And so, we need ethical leaders in these positions. And that's the only way Harris County is going to be the safest, greatest place to live.
Great. And parting comments. What would be a final message that you'd want to give to the Muslim community?
I think that, everything that the Muslim community believes in is universal. Seeking justice is what the DA does. And I think that together we can live in a great place. Now, I am campaigning during COVID, and so a lot of these live events are being canceled. And the best way to get out our information is through social media. So I have my little card right here. I have my Facebook. It's Mary Nan Huffman. My website is up there. So like me, follow me on social media, and spread the word, because this is really a grassroots campaign in a county of 4.6 million people. It is hard to get the word out there. So I'd appreciate any of that.
Got it. And we have your website listed at the bottom of the screen, marynanhuffman.com. Please check it out. Learn more about her policy positions. Follow her on Facebook, follow her on Twitter. I believe she has a YouTube channel as well. Check her out, learn more about her. And I believe her campaign's more than willing to take questions. You can send in your questions to her campaign. What's the email address?
It's just Mary Nan at marynanhuffman.com.
Excellent. They can reach out to you or your campaign, get their questions answered. My name is Sharik Abdul Ghani. I'm the director of Minaret Foundation, where our focus is to lift American Muslim voices for through multi-faith and civic engagement. We're joined today by Miss Mary Nan Huffman, who's running for Harris County District Attorney in probably one of the greatest cities in the world. It is Houston, Texas. Learn more about her at marynanhuffman.com. And she has actually kicked off our candidate Q&A series. Stay tuned to our Facebook and our website at minaretfoundation.com to learn more about the candidates that we're speaking with. We will actually be speaking with Ms. Huffman's opponent, District Attorney Kim Ogg, on Thursday, October 1st. So you can have different perspectives, different views. We are a 501c3. We're a nonpartisan, non-sectarian organization. Again, thank you to our guest today, Ms. Mary Nan Huffman, running for Harris County District Attorney. Thank you for being so generous with your time and generous with the answers, and we wish you the best.
Thank you so much.